G'day, The Other Side, your weekly summary of the best news and commentary without the woke, is taking a 2-week winter break. We're back with a brand new Season 2 for 2024 soon on Friday, July 19. Enjoy this clip from Season 1. There seems to be a fundamental problem that most Aussies, especially the young, seem to have no understanding of what our system is and how it works, right? The idea that the liberal free market is not something just fell out of the sky, that it evolved, that it's got a system attached to it, that capitalism has a system to it and it actually works and alleviates poverty. We're not teaching that stuff at schools, and kids aren't hearing it. So, Scott, where does that all stem from, that ignorance that kids seem to have these days of capitalism, of liberal economics?
Well, Damian, I imagine that it has come from people like us not teaching kids about responsibility. Responsibility, has an element of effort and suffering, and we have to embrace that to effectively, find fulfillment. Now, these kind of words are not the kind of words that younger people want to hear. They would much prefer to hear ideological slogans that suggest things come a lot easier.
But you're basically saying we can't absolve ourselves of responsibility. Well, we've somehow failed as Gen X or Boomers to educate, to mentor, to be there. I mean, that would be consistent with your natural law theory, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'd like to first off say that the Greens are always targeting young people because children are not responsible. They're not as responsible as adults. So that's our starting state. But what we actually have to do is grow into being trained into responsibility. So there's a process there. But for their own political goals, it's in their interest to interrupt that process and keep people in a dependent state because that suits, like I said, their political goals. But we talked a lot about entropy. And I find it a fascinating concept because it is a force of nature that any structure without a continual input of energy is going to entropy. Things are going to fall apart. If I don't eat, I will fall apart. If you don't restore a home, it'll fall apart. If you don't repaint a house, it'll fall apart.
We live in a universe of entropy.
Well,
right?
It's a constant force of nature. Through time, things are breaking down through time. And what you really find when you talk to a lot of left-wing activists about their worldview is they don't have an understanding of this fact. They say things like, well, if we just redistributed all the money, everyone would have enough. But that's not a through time understanding
of reality.
No, that's like taking a screenshot of a movie and thinking that's all there is, just the screenshot, just frozen in time. But money is something that happens through time. Entropy is a constant force which we're always trying to outrun. And it is part of the natural world, and that ties in with our natural law thing. So
philosophers and religious people would say we live in a broken world, a fallen world, right? The concept of the fallen world, which is a lot of religions.
Yeah.
That would be, you've got to work to even maintain the status quo because the tendency is to entropy.
That's right.
So the idea of responsibility.
And I think taking up on Rob's point that one of the things they talk about is if we redistributed all the money, then everything would go okay. That to me shows a fundamental lack of understanding of what money is.
Yeah.
Because if I take a couple of minutes to explain that quickly, money is a medium of exchange and nothing more. It has fundamental elements. One element is that it's a store of value, where you can store value over time. It transgresses over time.
Yeah, so
and another fundamental element is it's got to be infinitely divisible so that we can buy anything from, a cup of coffee to a island in the Caribbean,
right? That
kind of thing.
Yep.
So if you focus on the purpose and the function of money, which is to capture the value of an item, a product
in a particular time and geography, in a way, transport it to another time and geography,
and then take that representation of that value in the money and move it forward.
Yep.
You'll understand that the primary focus is on the product. It's not the money. Really you need to, if you were going to talk in that way, you would have to say, well, let's take all of the product and distribute that, across everybody. But as we know, that's, the product, once distributed, is gone.
Right.
So there's a never-ending cycle.
And what they don't realise, right, is that once you do that, once you take that product off someone who's produced it and you redistribute it to someone who hasn't produced it, you've just incentivised the behaviour of the person who isn't producing by rewarding them for not producing, and you've penalised the behaviour of the person who produced by taking half of their earnings off them.
You've increased the entropy in the system.
You've increased the entropy in the system,
Well, maybe the other important thing to get across, and this will come down to government's role in the process, is the monetary system that we've now operated under for a little over 100 years is what they call a fiat monetary system. So fiat means by decree, decreed by an authority, in this case government. So we know that the paper notes or the plastic notes have no intrinsic value whatsoever. The only reason they have value is because there is a decree that they will represent, value.
Well, once upon a time it was backed by gold. We came off the gold standard in the 60s, the 70s. We've had this floating currency situation. Without getting into the theory of money too much, we'd be there all day. But basically, the idea that you can just print more money, which is the basis of Keynesian economics, or modern monetary theory is the extreme version of that, that the Greens actively promote, right? The socialists actively promote, government can just keep... Well, the reason they promote that is it is a form of redistribution, right? It's a form of devaluing the money of those who've got that money and have saved it and giving it to others.
Well, to get to the end point really quickly, because as you say, it's a long conversation, but the bottom line of it all is when we went off the gold standard and fiat money ruled the economies of all Western democracies, that means that the governments control the monetary system. So when the governments control the monetary system, they have at their disposal the power to, in essence, appropriate the entire wealth of countries. The entire wealth.
Okay, let's just repeat that point. They have within their power
the
ability to appropriate all the money, all of the wealth, all the actual wealth.
They control the system. So, as they print it, and it's not just printing money, it's credit terms as well, because providing credit is the same as creating money. If there's not something there to back it and you create the credit, that's the same as creating more money. And everybody knows that more money means more inflation, and that of course is the cost.
Well, does everybody know that? Does the average kid?
I'm skeptical.
If you walked out, if you walked down the street, you said to a kid, hey, why doesn't the government just print more money? And you have to explain to them, well, if there's $100 in the system, and your apple, costs you, is worth $5 today, and then you print another $100. Then there's $200 in the system. Guess what happens to the price of your apple? Goes up to $10.
So you can increase the money supply if there's also a corresponding increase in goods and services, i.e. reciprocal value to people. But if you don't actually have an increase in production, you have an increase in the money supply, you'll get inflation.
Yeah. So that at the core of it, there's an understanding. This is what we're talking about today. Really, is that. Limits, should there be limits imposed on the powers that governments have? And when you come down to the core system, which is the money supply, subject to them allowing inflation to run away, they can in essence print or issue credit, any amount of money, which effectively appropriates the entire wealth of the nation. They have the system. Under the gold standard, another element of our money is that it's got to be in scarce supply. It can't be in unlimited supply, because if it is an unlimited supply, then
it's worthless.
Correct.
Yeah. So scarcity has to be enforced somehow, and we enforce it with the government controls. But if the government wants to, it can print more money, and therefore it takes. But where the left get confused is they think, the government's printing more money, they're creating more value in the system. No, they're not. You can't create more value in the system unless you have productive work.
All the value.
Someone has to do stuff.
All the value is in what we produce.
Yes.
All of it.
Yes. So that's the problem. So we get to redistribution, and we're talking about taking value from person A or group A that's productive and giving it to group B that's not productive. Hope you enjoyed that clip. The Other Side, your weekly summary of the best news and commentary without the woke, is taking a 2-week winter break. We're back with a brand new season 2 for 2024 soon on Friday, July 19. To support us, please make sure you subscribe on YouTube right here and follow us on X at OthersideAus. That's AUS. It's totally free, but we could always do with your support. So if you'd like to make a donation, click the Super Thanks button on YouTube with the $ and the thanks on it right under the video frame below. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can check out the full episode that this clip came from right here.